Welcome to Sleep Universe, a place where stories drift among the stars and dreams carry you beyond the night. Close your eyes, breathe deep. Your journey into rest begins now.
The first whisper of rain began just as the old train sighed to a halt at the Hollowmere station, a quaint, forgotten stop nestled deep in the emerald heart of the countryside. You pulled your worn leather satchel closer, the cool dampness seeping through the carriage window, a gentle prelude to the atmospheric world you were about to enter. Beside you, your sibling, Alex, stretched, a soft yawn escaping their lips as they peered out at the mist-shrouded platform. "Hollowmere," Alex murmured, the name a soft echo in the quiet compartment. "Sounds like something from a storybook, doesn't it?" Indeed it did. The mysterious letter, penned in elegant, looping script on thick, cream-colored paper, had arrived just 3 days prior. It spoke of a matter of utmost delicacy concerning irreplaceable literary treasures at the esteemed Hollowmere Library, and it bore no return address, only a faint crest depicting an open book wreathed in ivy. It was precisely the kind of cryptic invitation that set your detective's heart aflutter, a thrilling call to a quiet adventure. Stepping onto the platform, the air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. The station itself was small, a single gas lamp casting a warm, flickering glow on the brickwork. No other passengers disembarked, and the only soul awaiting was a tall, stooped man in a dark, slightly too large coat, clutching an old umbrella. He looked up as you and Alex approached, his eyes shadowed beneath a broad-brimmed hat, holding a nervous flicker. "You must be the ones from the letter," he stated, his voice a low rumble tinged with a tremor. "Mr. Whitaker, at your service, caretaker of Hollowmere Library." You offered a polite smile, introducing yourselves. "We're here to assist, Mr. Whitaker." The letter was rather vague, though intriguing. Mr. Whitaker nodded, his gaze darting around the deserted platform as if fearing eavesdroppers. Indeed, indeed. Best to speak of such things within the library's walls. The truth is unsettling. He gestured towards a sturdy, albeit slightly antiquated motor car parked a short distance away. The library is but a mile's drive. The road is often shrouded this time of evening. The journey was silent, save for the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers against the growing rain. The landscape transformed from open fields to dense, ancient woods, the trees forming a tunnel overhead, their branches heavy with moisture. A sense of timelessness began to settle over you, a feeling of stepping back into an era when gas lamps and hidden paths were the norm. Then, through a break in the trees, it emerged. Hollowmere Library. It was an edifice of Gothic grandeur, a sprawling Victorian structure of dark, weathered stone, its many gables and turrets silhouetted against the bruised twilight sky. Ivy, thick and ancient, clung to its walls, embracing the tall, arched windows like protective green tendrils. The rain, now a steady downpour, tapped a melancholic rhythm against the glass, creating a symphony of hushed sorrow. "It's magnificent," Alex breathed, their earlier sleepiness entirely forgotten. "And a little bit spooky," you added, a thrill running down your spine. The library exuded an aura of profound history, of countless stories held within its stone heart, but also a whisper of untold secrets. Mr. Whitaker drove up a long gravel path that crunched beneath the tires, eventually pulling up to a massive oak door studded with iron. He got out quickly, fumbling with a large ring of keys, the metallic jingle a surprisingly loud sound in the quiet evening. As he unlocked the door, a gust of wind swept through, carrying with it the faint, sweet scent of old paper and dust. The entrance hall was cavernous, stretching upwards into a dizzying dome ceiling adorned with intricate plasterwork. Shadows danced in the corners, deepened by the single grand chandelier that hung overhead, its gas flames flickering with a soft, warm light that struggled to banish the gloom. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow your every move, lined the walls, their expressions perpetually caught in a silent judgment. "Welcome to Hollowmere Library," Mr. Whitaker announced, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the sleeping giants of literature around them. He closed the heavy door with a soft thud that reverberated through the vast space. "Please follow me. We shall go directly to the main reading room. The others are awaiting your arrival." As you stepped deeper into the library, the air grew cooler, imbued with the unmistakable aroma of aged parchment, leather bindings, and polished wood. The rain continued its steady insistence on the windows, a constant, soothing presence that underscored the building's ancient stillness. Each of your footsteps, even on the thick oriental rugs that softened the stone floors, felt amplified, respectful of the hushed sanctity of the place. The main reading room was a breathtaking sight. Towering shelves, laden with thousands of books, stretched from floor to ceiling, their spines a kaleidoscope of faded colors and gilded lettering. Ornate wooden ladders leaned against them, inviting exploration. A magnificent fireplace dominated one wall, a gentle fire crackling within, casting dancing orange light that softened the room's imposing dimensions. Several plush armchairs were arranged around a large polished oak table upon which sat an antique globe and a scattering of scholarly tomes. Around the table, 3 figures were already seated. They looked up as you and Alex entered, their gazes, though varying in intensity, unified in their quiet scrutiny. This was it, the moment of introduction, where the first threads of the mystery would begin to weave themselves into the fabric of your investigation. The mystery of Hollowmere Library had truly begun. You settled into one of the plush armchairs, the velvet soft beneath your fingers, and Alex took the seat beside you. The warmth of the crackling fire was a welcome contrast to the damp chill that seemed to cling to the library's ancient stones. The silence that followed Mr. Whitaker's introductions was heavy, broken only by the persistent tapping of the rain against the tall windows and the occasional soft hiss of a log in the hearth. You let the quiet stretch, observing each person, allowing them to feel the weight of your presence, the calm but unwavering curiosity you both exuded. Lady Ravenscroft was the first to speak, her voice a refined counterpoint to the storm outside. Mr. Whitaker's letter, though perhaps a tad dramatic, did convey the gravity of the situation. We are missing several irreplaceable manuscripts, from the restricted section no less. Professor Alden adjusted his spectacles, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. Irreplaceable indeed. We're speaking of the Chronicles of Atheria and the Celestial Atlas of Elara, texts dating back to the 14th and 15th centuries. Their historical and academic value is immeasurable. To think they could simply vanish. He trailed off, shaking his head slowly. Vanished without a trace, Mr. Whitaker added, wringing his hands, his gaze darting nervously around the room as if the missing manuscripts would suddenly materialize in a forgotten corner. You leaned forward slightly, your voice calm and measured. Perhaps you could walk us through what happened, Mr. Whitaker, from the beginning. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. Well, it was 2 nights ago. I perform a nightly check of the restricted section, just as Lord Ravenscroft always insisted. Everything was in order. The heavy oak door was locked, the special key secured. Then yesterday morning, when I opened up for Professor Alden, who was due to consult some other texts in that section, we discovered it. He paused, as if reliving the moment. The specific shelf where the chronicles and the atlas were kept was empty. And the door to the restricted section, Alex interjected, their eyes keenly focused on the caretaker. Still locked? Yes, Mr. Whitaker exclaimed, nodding vigorously. That's the most perplexing part. I had the key on my person, as always. No one else has a key. Or at least, they shouldn't. He glanced uneasily at the others, then quickly looked away. Lady Ravenscroft sighed, a delicate sound. My late husband had the only other key, of course. It was an heirloom, passed down through generations of library custodians. After his passing, I ensured it was sealed away. A private matter. Her lips pressed into a thin line, revealing nothing more. So 2 keys exist, you mused aloud, mostly to yourself. One with Mr. Whitaker and one secured by Lady Ravenscroft. Unless there's another. Professor Alden cleared his throat. I assure you I have no access to that section, save for Mr. Whitaker's assistance. My work is with other, less sensitive volumes. His denial felt a little too eager, perhaps. You made a mental note. Clara, the quiet maid, had remained silent, her gaze fixed on the fire. You turned to her, your voice gentle. Clara, have you noticed anything unusual in the past few days? Any strange noises, unfamiliar faces, anything at all out of the ordinary? She flinched slightly at being addressed directly, her dark eyes flickering up to yours. No, sir. Always quiet, the library. Just the rain. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, but you caught a subtle hesitation, a flicker of something unsaid. Her hands, still clasped, tightened almost imperceptibly. Quiet, yes, Alex echoed, their gaze following Clara's. But sometimes in places this old, quiet can hide a lot. Indeed, you agreed. Mr. Whitaker, perhaps you could describe the restricted section to us, and tell us about the key. Is it a unique lock? The caretaker nodded, seemingly relieved to discuss facts rather than implications. It's an antique lock, very sturdy. The key is quite large, made of dark, heavy iron with a distinctive, elaborate bit. Lord Ravenscroft himself had it specially crafted generations ago. As for the section, it's a smaller room off the main gallery behind that tapestry there. He pointed to a large, faded tapestry depicting a hunting scene hung on the far wall. Climate-controlled, fireproofed, all the precautions for the most precious items. You considered this. An old, unique lock suggested a certain resistance to modern lock-picking techniques, but not necessarily to someone who possessed a copy of the key, or perhaps even the original. And what about the library's security in general? Are there night watchmen, alarms beyond the restricted section? Only myself and Clara reside here, and a groundskeeper who lives in the cottage by the gates. Lord Ravenscroft always believed the library's seclusion and the strength of its locks were protection enough. Rather old-fashioned view, I suppose, but that's how it's always been. This information was significant. It meant a small pool of suspects and perhaps a reliance on trust rather than technology. Lady Ravenscroft, who had been listening intently, now added, I have been staying in the adjoining wing for the past week, overseeing the preparations for the annual patrons' dinner. I assure you, my key to the restricted section remains securely locked away in a safe within my private chambers. It hasn't been touched since Lord Ravenscroft's passing. Her statement was firm. leaving no room for doubt. Or so it seemed. Professor Alden, you arrived how long ago? Alex asked, turning their attention back to the scholar. Approximately 2 weeks, he replied promptly. I'm staying in one of the guest suites on the 3rd floor. My days are spent either in the archives or, more recently, hoping to access the restricted section for specific cross-referencing. He gestured to a stack of books beside his chair. I'm compiling a comparative study on medieval calligraphy. These manuscripts are vital to my research. There was a brief silence as you absorbed the information, piecing together the initial fragments. 2 keys, a secluded library, a small group of individuals, each with their own reasons for being here, and a theft with no obvious point of entry. It smelled of an inside job. Before we delve deeper, you announced, rising from your chair, we would like to see the scene of the crime, as it were, the restricted section, and then perhaps a tour of the library. We believe in understanding the environment fully. Mr. Whitaker nodded, relief mixed with apprehension on his face. Of course, follow me. He retrieved a large, heavy key from his waistcoat pocket, its iron gleam catching the firelight. As you moved toward the tapestry, Professor Alden made a quiet comment, almost to himself. It's unsettling, isn't it? The thought of someone so brazen to steal from history itself. Lady Ravenscroft merely observed, her expression unreadable. Clara, however, gave a barely perceptible shiver as she watched Mr. Whitaker reach for the tapestry, a silent gesture that spoke volumes. The caretaker pulled aside the heavy fabric, revealing a plain, sturdy oak door, almost camouflaged against the stone. It was secured by a single, formidable iron lock. With a creak that seemed to echo through the vast room, Mr. Whitaker inserted the large, distinctive key. The tumblers clicked, a series of soft, metallic sounds that were surprisingly loud in the hushed library. The doors swung open, revealing a dimly lit passage beyond, thick with the scent of aged paper. A scent both comforting and, in this context, deeply unsettling. You stepped towards the threshold, Alex close behind. The Mystery of Hollowmere was about to reveal its first tangible clues.
The restricted section was a small, octagonal room, significantly colder and damper than the main reading hall, despite Mr. Whitaker's assurances of climate control. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of aged vellum and the metallic tang of old ink. Glass-fronted shelves, designed to protect their precious contents, lined the walls, each one secured with a small, individual lock. A single, bare gas lamp, its flame flickering weakly, cast long, dancing shadows that made the already eerie space feel claustrophobic. "This is it," Mr. Whitaker murmured, his voice hushed, as if even a normal tone might disturb the unseen thief. He gestured vaguely to a section of empty shelving behind a protective glass panel. They were here, the Chronicles and the Atlas. You and Alex stepped further into the room, your eyes scanning every surface, every shadow. The floor was old flagstone, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. You knelt, running your gloved fingers along the grout lines, feeling for any disturbed dust, any unnatural marks. Nothing immediately jumped out. "The glass panels, Mr. Whitaker," Alex pointed out. "Were they locked when you discovered the theft?" "They were," he confirmed, pulling a smaller, more delicate key from his ring. "Each panel has its own lock. That's why it's so impossible. They were locked from the inside, yet the books were gone." You examined the small, intricate locks on the empty shelves. They appeared undisturbed, no obvious signs of force. Could they have been opened and relocked using a duplicate of this smaller key? Mr. Whitaker wrung his hands again. "It's highly unlikely. These keys are even more specialized. There are dozens of them, all unique to their individual panels. It would take an entire ring of them to access everything in here. Unless someone had master keys. Lady Ravenscroft, who had remained silent at the threshold, now spoke, her voice echoing faintly. There were no master keys, Mr. Whittaker. Lord Ravenscroft was adamant about that. Compartmentalized security. It was his firm belief. You rose, your gaze sweeping over the remaining manuscripts, pristine and untouched behind their glass. So if no one forced the outer door and the inner glass panels were relocked, it suggests someone had access to both keys, or an incredible skill for picking locks without leaving a trace. As Alex continued to examine the glass panels, you turned your attention to the floor directly beneath the empty shelf. The flagstones, ancient as they were, had accumulated a fine layer of dust in the corners, undisturbed by daily foot traffic. But in one particular crevice, almost hidden by shadow, you noticed a faint anomaly. It was a single, small, dark shard, barely visible against the dark stone. You carefully knelt again, reaching for your magnifying glass. Examining it closely, you realized it wasn't stone. It was a fragment of parchment, brittle and old, the edges ragged. It was no larger than your thumbnail, but on its surface, faded but still discernible, was a fragment of script, a single, looping capital E, followed by part of what looked like an L. The ink was dark brown, almost black, and looked exceedingly ancient. Alex, you murmured, holding it up. Look at this. Alex carefully took the fragment. Parchment, and old. Could it be from one of the stolen manuscripts? Mr. Whittaker gasped, peering over your shoulder. That's the Celestial Atlas of Ilara. That's how it begins. Ilara's something or other. The title page has a distinctive script, much like this fragment. His face was pale. It must have been dropped when they were removed. Which implies the thief was here, in this very spot, when the theft occurred, and not simply someone who unlocked the outer door, took them, and left. They handled them here. This was your first solid clue, a tangible piece of the puzzle, but it raised more questions than answers. How did the thief get in? And how did they relock the glass panel from the outside? As you meticulously scanned the rest of the room, something else caught your eye. Near the heavy oak door leading out of the restricted section, half hidden beneath a dusty display cabinet, lay a small object. It was a key, dark and intricately fashioned, strikingly similar in style to the one Mr. Whittaker used for the main door, but noticeably smaller, its bit slightly different. Mr. Whittaker, you asked, carefully picking it up with a gloved hand, is this one of your keys? The caretaker frowned, taking the key and examining it closely. His eyes widened, and a new wave of nervousness washed over him. No, this isn't mine. My key is much larger. This is very similar but not the same, and it certainly doesn't belong in here. He fumbled through his ring of keys. None of these match this one. It's a master key. Professor Alden stepped forward, his voice hushed. Or perhaps a duplicate. It's too well made to be a casual forgery. This looks like a key to another door within the library, perhaps an older, forgotten one. Lady Ravenscroft approached, her expression now a mixture of concern and something akin to recognition. She looked at the key in Mr. Whittaker's hand, then at the main door of the restricted section. That key, it reminds me of something, an old story Lord Ravenscroft used to tell about a key that opened, well, he was always vague. A forgotten passage, he said. But I always assumed it was just a fanciful tale. Yet, a key like this suggests there might be truth to the legends. A key with this kind of craftsmanship doesn't made for a simple broom cupboard. Precisely, Professor Alden agreed, his academic curiosity clearly piqued.
Older libraries, particularly those built by wealthy families, often contain such architectural secrets, hidden rooms for safekeeping or simply for privacy. Clara, who had been quietly observing the conversation, suddenly looked up. Her eyes, usually downcast, held a spark of apprehension. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then hesitated, glancing at Mr. Whittaker, who seemed to notice her fleeting intention and subtly shift his weight, drawing her gaze. She closed her mouth again, her secret remaining unsaid. You and Alex exchanged a glance. Clara knew something. Her silence was becoming as loud as everyone else's words. We need to conduct a thorough search of the library, you announced, addressing the group, starting with the main gallery and then the restricted archives. We'll be looking for anything out of place, any discrepancies, any whispers behind locked doors. You specifically emphasized that last part, your gaze resting for a moment on Clara, then on Mr. Whittaker. Mr. Whittaker cleared his throat. Of course, I'll show you around. The gallery is immense, though. He seemed reluctant, but didn't argue. And the more eyes, the better, I suppose, Lady Ravenscroft stated, though her tone suggested a slight weariness. Just try not to disturb the more fragile collections. Professor Alden, however, seemed invigorated by the new clues. A fascinating development, a hidden passage. This adds an entirely new dimension to the mystery. Perhaps I can assist with the search, point out any unusual architectural features. His eagerness felt genuine. As Mr. Whittaker retrieved a large, old lantern from a hook by the fireplace, its glass panes rattling softly, you felt a surge of excitement. The library, initially a grand but passive backdrop, was beginning to reveal its active role in the mystery. The pieces were scattered, but the game was well and truly afoot. The rain continued to fall, a soothing, persistent rhythm accompanying every thought you made as you prepared to delve deeper into Hollowmere's secrets.
Mr. Whittaker led the way, his lantern casting a swinging arc of light that barely pushed back the encroaching shadows of the main gallery. The grand reading room had felt imposing, but the gallery of paintings, which snaked around the perimeter of the library's central dome, was truly vast. It was a labyrinth of dim corners, towering portraits, and display cases filled with ancient artifacts. The air here was even colder, carrying a faint, musty scent that spoke of undisturbed time. The main gallery, Mr. Whittaker announced, his lantern, cautious, holds the family portraits and various historical curiosities Lord Ravenscroft collected. The archives, where Professor Alden does his research, are through that archway. He gestured to a high Gothic arch at the far end of the gallery, beyond which even deeper gloom resided. You and Alex began your meticulous sweep. Your method was always the same: divide and conquer, but remain within earshot. Alex focused on the lower shelves and display cases, examining each lock and latch, feeling for loose panels or disturbed dust. You, meanwhile, surveyed the towering walls, running your gloved hands along the paneling beneath the portraits, tapping gently, listening for any hollow sounds that might betray a hidden space. The portraits themselves were a silent, watchful audience. Generations of Ravenscrofts, their eyes following you with an unsettling realism, seemed to guard their secrets fiercely. One particular portrait, a stern-faced woman in a ruff, had eyes that seemed to glow in the lantern light. You paused, feeling an odd chill, but dismissed it as merely the trick of light and shadow. As you moved along, the rhythmic tapping of the rain became a comforting counterpoint to the creaks and groans of the old building settling around you. The floorboards occasionally gave a soft sigh beneath your weight. You tried to differentiate between the natural sounds of an old house and something more deliberate.
Alex called out softly near a display case filled with ancient navigation tools. Anything suspicious yet, aside from the usual old house creaks? Only the feeling that every ancestor here is judging my detection skills, you replied with a small smile. How about you? Just a lot of dust and very secure locks. And this rather impressive astrolabe. It almost looks like it belongs to the celestial atlas. Suddenly, a soft, scraping sound echoed from somewhere above you, near the ceiling. It was faint, barely audible over the rain, but distinct. It wasn't the creak of old wood, it was more like something being dragged. You froze, listening intently. Did you hear that? Alex nodded, their gaze immediately sweeping upwards. Sounded like it came from above us, or perhaps a higher floor, directly above this section of the gallery. Mr. Whitaker, who had been hovering nervously, wrung his hands. It's just the house settling. Old places make noises. Always have. But his eyes darted upwards, betraying his unease. You exchanged a look with Alex. It wasn't just the house settling. It had been too specific, too deliberate. Let's investigate upstairs later. For now, let's keep to this floor. You made a mental note to check the floor plan for rooms directly above this area. Continuing your search, you came across a small antique writing desk tucked into an alcove. Its surface was cluttered with forgotten quills, dried inkwells, and a scattering of old letters tied with faded ribbons. As you gently sifted through them, your fingers brushed against something stiff tucked beneath a stack of correspondence. It was a single, large feather, its quill worn as if from extensive use. It wasn't a modern pen. This was an old-fashioned writing implement. You recalled Professor Alden's mention of medieval calligraphy. It seemed a little out of place here, amidst personal letters. You bagged it. A potential, if minor, clue. Meanwhile, Alex had moved further along the wall, examining a large wooden panel that seemed slightly out of place amongst the stone. They tapped it gently. This sounds hollow here. You joined them, tapping the panel yourself. Indeed, it yielded a distinctly different resonance than the surrounding wall. It was too perfectly aligned, too seamless to be a simple architectural anomaly. A secret door? Alex whispered, excitement coloring her voice. Or just a service panel, you cautioned, though your own pulse quickened. You ran your fingers along the edges, feeling for a hidden latch, a faint seam. There was nothing obvious. The craftsmanship was superb. This, you suspected, was what Lady Ravenscroft's late husband might have referred to. Suddenly, a soft thump came from behind the panel. It was muffled, but undeniably there. And then, a faint, almost inaudible whisper, too indistinct to make out words, but undoubtedly human. Mr. Whitaker jumped, startled. What's that? Who's there? His voice was shaky, laced with fear. You motioned him to be silent, pressing your ear closer to the wood. The whispering stopped abruptly, a moment of tense silence, then the distinct sound of quick, retreating footsteps, muffled but fast, fading away into the depths of the wall. Someone was there, Alex stated, their expression grim, and they didn't want to be found. You exchanged a glance. The whispers behind locked doors from your blueprint had just become very real. This wasn't merely atmosphere, it was an active presence, clearly observing you. The presence, it seemed, could access hidden passages. It sounds like there might be a passage, or at least a void, behind this panel. You concluded, pulling out the mysterious key found in the restricted section. You tried inserting it into several minute indentations on the panel's surface, but none seemed to fit. The panel remained stubbornly closed. This isn't the key for this door, It might be for another, but we know there's something back there. Mr. Whitaker was visibly shaken. This is unprecedented. I've worked here for 30 years and I never knew there was anything behind that panel. He looked genuinely bewildered, perhaps even a little frightened. Perhaps Lord Ravenscraft kept some secrets even from you, you suggested, not unkindly. These old houses have a way of holding on to their past. Deciding to return to the panel later, armed with more information, or perhaps a better key, you continued your search, moving towards the archives. The long corridor leading to them was lined with even more shelves, filled with lesser-known but still valuable texts. The air grew thicker with the scent of paper and aged leather. In the archives, Professor Alden was already hard at work, poring over a large folio at a central desk, surrounded by stacks of reference books. He looked up as you entered, his scholarly concentration broken. "Anything else amiss in here, Professor?" you asked, scanning the tightly packed shelves. He shook his head. "No, everything seems to be in its proper place. The medieval section where I do most of my research is intact, though I confess my mind keeps wandering to the missing chronicles." As Alex joined him, asking more specific questions about the organization of the archives, you moved towards the far end of the room, near a large window overlooking the dense woods. The rain was lashing against the glass, blurring the dark shapes outside. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught your eye in the gloom outside, deep in the trees. It was small, intermittent, and moved quickly, almost like a lantern being carried swiftly through the undergrowth. "Did you see that?" you murmured to Alex, pointing. Alex squinted into the dark. "Too faint. What was it?" Before you could confirm, the light vanished, swallowed by the thick foliage and the driving rain. It could have been anything, a trick of light, an animal, or something more. Another red herring, perhaps, designed to pull your attention away from the real secrets within the library. Or perhaps another piece of the puzzle. You turned away from the window, a new thought forming. Someone was moving around the grounds in the dead of night, during a storm. Who would be out there and why? Was it connected to the theft, or merely another one of Hollowmere's strange occurrences? The library felt alive now, no longer merely a quiet repository of books. It was a breathing entity, filled with whispers, shadows, and the constant thrum of secrets. The gentle rhythm of the rain, once soothing, now felt like a relentless ticking clock, counting down to a revelation.
The library seemed to grow colder as the evening deepened, the warmth from the main reading room's fireplace barely reaching the distant corners of the gallery and archives. You and Alex continued your methodical search, but the immediate thrill of the hollow panel and the mysterious footsteps had given way to a more pervasive sense of unease. The library was putting on a show, drawing your attention to fleeting glimpses and phantom sounds. As you moved through a particularly narrow corridor, lined with ancient maps, the gas lamp in the ceiling above you flickered violently, then suddenly extinguished itself with a soft pop, plunging that section of the hall into near total darkness. Only the distant glow from Mr. Whitaker's lantern further down the gallery provided any light. "Well, that's rather convenient," Alex remarked, their voice a low murmur beside you. "Or just a very old gas lamp." "Or deliberately tampered with," you countered, your eyes quickly adjusting to the gloom. You reached into your satchel for your small, powerful flashlight, its beam cutting a sharp swathe through the inky blackness. You examined the lamp's casing, but found nothing obvious. It simply seemed to have gone out. Just as you were about to move on, a distinct metallic clink sounded from the wall directly beside you, followed by a faint scratching. It was too precise, too deliberate to be a natural sound. It came from behind a large framed astrological chart.
You and Alex exchanged a quick, silent glance. Flashlight beam at the ready, you carefully moved the heavy frame. Behind it, the wall was plain stone. Nothing. Yet the sound had been unmistakably there. A vent, perhaps, Alex suggested. Tapping the wall. It felt solid. Or a trick of the ear, you murmured, though you knew better. This was too specific. Someone wanted you to think there was something there, or perhaps they were playing a game. As you moved back into the main gallery, the something dragged sound echoed again, fainter this time, from the floor above. It was a repetitive, soft thump scrape, as if a heavy, unbalanced object was being moved across a wooden floor. It's coming from directly above the hollow panel area, Alex noted, consulting the rough mental map they'd been building. Maybe it's a servant moving furniture for the patron's dinner. Mr. Whitaker, who was still trailing a few steps behind, his shadow stretching long and distorted, offered nervously, "It could be Clara. She's often tidying late, though she's usually so quiet." He seemed genuinely torn between rational explanations and the growing dread in his own heart. You decided to investigate the upstairs later, but the sound and its precise location certainly fed into the growing suspicion that hidden passages or accessible rooms were above the spot where the mysterious whispers had been heard. Continuing your search, you arrived back in the main reading room, where Professor Alden was still engrossed in his research, seemingly oblivious to the library's creaks and groans. Lady Ravenscroft had retired to her wing, stating that she found the current situation too unsettling to remain in the presence of stolen history. Clara was nowhere to be seen, having vanished sometime during your exploration. You approached Professor Alden. "Professor, have you heard any unusual noises tonight? Perhaps a lamp going out or strange sounds from upstairs?" He looked up, blinking. "Unusual noises? Only the excellent rain, I'm afraid. My concentration is quite absolute when I'm in the throes of research, and the gas lamps here are prone to flickering, a charmingly antiquated aspect of the place, wouldn't you agree?" His dismissive tone felt a little too practiced. Was he truly so absorbed, or was he feigning ignorance? As he spoke, you noticed a small, almost imperceptible stain on the cuff of his tweed jacket, near his wrist. It was a dark, reddish-brown smudge, like dried ink, but larger and slightly more irregular than a typical ink stain. You recalled the dark, almost black ink of the parchment fragment. "Professor," you said, your voice casual, "do you use a quill for your notes?" He glanced at his cuff, then quickly tucked his hand under the table, almost defensively. "Sometimes, when I'm transcribing old texts, it helps me to better understand the scribe's craft. Why do you ask?" He offered a small, disarming smile, but his eyes held a wary glint. "Just curiosity," you replied, smoothly, though your mind was buzzing. A quill, in a digital age, was an interesting detail. And the stain, a distinct red herring, perhaps, or a subtle clue. Alex, ever observant, had noticed the exchange. They caught your eye and gave a subtle nod, indicating they'd picked up on the professor's evasiveness. Later, as you and Alex settled into their assigned guest rooms, the quiet of the night was only punctuated by the ceaseless drumming of the rain. Your room was comfortable, if a little Spartan, with a large window looking out onto a manicured garden that was now a blurred expanse of dark green. You unpacked your small detective kit, laying out your notes and the collected clues, the parchment fragment, the mysterious key, and the quill feather. The pieces were beginning to form a disjointed image. "So who's our lead suspect tonight?" Alex asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, sketching a rough floor plan in their notebook. "Everyone and no one," I admitted. "Mr. Whitaker is nervous and defensive. Lady Ravenscroft is protective of her family's legacy, almost to a fault. Professor Alden is a little too calm, too dismissive of the strange occurrences. and has a suspicious ink stain. And Clara knows something, but she's too afraid to speak. And the footsteps, the whispers, the flickering light, the moving light in the woods, Alex listed them off. A lot of distractions, aren't they? Or genuine attempts to throw us off course. Precisely, I agreed. The library is a stage, and someone is directing this play. The question is, are these red herrings meant to hide the truth, or are they subtle hints cleverly disguised? You picked up the mysterious key, turning it over in your fingers. The thought of a hidden passage still tugged at your mind. The whispers behind the panel, the distinct footsteps receding. That felt more tangible than the flickering lights or the sounds from upstairs. Those could be indeed old house noises, cleverly mimicked or subtly amplified. But the physical presence behind that panel felt real. You pulled out your comprehensive map of the library, provided by Mr. Whitaker upon your arrival, a relic itself with faded ink and brittle edges. You located the section of the gallery where you had found the hollow panel. Above it, on the second floor, the map showed a series of seldom-used storage rooms and an old, disused study, marked simply as the Ravenscroft study, unused. An unused study, a hidden panel, a key that opened a forgotten passage. The pieces were beginning to click into a more coherent narrative, pushing aside the distracting sounds and fleeting lights. The real mystery, you suspected, lay not in the dramatic, overt acts, but in the subtle, architectural secrets of Hollowmere itself. You knew what your next step had to be. Find that hidden passage, find the key that opened it. The rain continued its gentle, ceaseless rhythm, lulling the old library and you into a state of watchful contemplation. The night was young, and Hollowmere still held many secrets in its quiet depths.
The morning dawned gray and still, the rain having finally ceased, leaving behind a world hushed and glistening. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the fresh scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine from the gardens. You and Alex rose early, a sense of quiet determination guiding your movements. The distractions of the previous night, the flickering lights, the distant sounds, had only sharpened your focus on the hollow panel and the mysterious key. After a quiet breakfast, where only Mr. Whitaker nervously poured tea and Professor Alden buried his nose in a scholarly journal, you and Alex made your way directly back to the main gallery. The sunlight, filtering weakly through the high windows, revealed the dust motes dancing in the air, but did little to dispel the library's inherent gloom. You stood before the large wooden panel, running your hands over its smooth, unyielding surface. "This is where the whispers came from," you reminded Alex, your voice low. "Someone was behind here, observing us." Alex nodded, her fingers tracing the faint, almost invisible seam you had discovered last night. "The craftsmanship is remarkable. Lord Ravenscroft certainly knew how to keep a secret." You pulled out the mysterious key found in the restricted section, examining its unique bit. It was unlike any modern key you'd seen, clearly designed for an older, more intricate mechanism. You had spent a restless night studying the library's old blueprint, particularly the section directly above this part of the gallery and the unused Ravenscroft study. The location of the panel, combined with the whispers, now seemed undeniably linked to the missing manuscripts. If Lord Ravenscroft was a man who enjoyed adding to the library's legends, then he would have enjoyed a secret passage that was truly secret, you mused. You carefully re-examined the panel, searching for any hidden catch, any subtle indentation that might serve as a keyhole. The wooden surface was flawless, however, betraying no obvious entry point. Then you remembered Lady Ravenscroft's vague recollection, a key that opened, well, he was always vague, a forgotten passage, he said, and Professor Alden's comment about older libraries containing such architectural secrets.
What if the keyhole wasn't immediately visible? What if it was disguised? Your gaze fell upon a small, ornate carving on the panel itself, a stylized raven, its wings outstretched, perched atop an open book. It was perfectly integrated into the overall design, a decorative flourish like many others in the library. But as you looked at it more closely, you noticed a tiny indentation on the raven's breast, almost imperceptible. It was just the right size for the tip of the mysterious key. "Alex, look here," you whispered, pointing it out. Alex leaned in, their eyes widening. A hidden keyhole. Brilliant. With a steady hand, you inserted the mysterious key into the tiny indent. There was a faint click, then a soft whirring sound from within the wall, the groan of old mechanics coming to life. The raven's eye seemed to gleam in the dim light. Slowly, with a deep, resonant creak, a section of the wooden panel, perfectly camouflaged, swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow opening beyond. A gust of cold, stale air, thick with the scent of undisturbed dust and extreme age, wafted out. Beyond the opening, a dimly lit, winding stone staircase spiraled upwards into darkness. The air was heavy, still, and utterly silent. "We found it," Alex breathed, a thrill of discovery in her voice. The secret passage. It was precisely as the legends, however vague, had hinted. You retrieved your powerful flashlight, its beam illuminating the rough-hewn stone steps, slick with dust. Cobwebs, thick and ancient, draped from the ceiling like ghostly curtains. The silence of the passage was profound, absorbing all sound. This is likely the passage Lord Ravenscroft spoke of, and if the footsteps we heard last night were retreating, then someone else knows about this passage, and they've used it recently. You and Alex ascended the winding stair, your flashlights cutting through the oppressive gloom. Each step echoed eerily in the confined space. The air grew progressively colder, and the scent of old paper intensified. It was clear this passage had not been used in generations, yet the fresh scent of disturbed dust suggested otherwise. The staircase ended at another heavy wooden door, this one plain and unadorned, blending seamlessly with what appeared to be an interior wall. You tried the mysterious key again, but this lock was different. It seemed to be merely bolted from the inside. "No, this isn't a keyed lock," Alex observed, running her hand over the sturdy wood. "It's either bolted or designed to be opened from the other side." You examined the door more closely. There was a faint scratch mark near the bottom, recently made, as if something had been dragged across it. This door leads into the unused Ravenscroft study, and it's been recently opened from the other side, you deduced, recalling the blueprint. Pushing gently, you found the door yielded. With another soft creak, it swung inward, revealing a dark, plunged-in shadow, but clearly lived in. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak light that penetrated the heavy velvet curtains. This was no unused study. The room was large, dominated by a heavy oak desk littered with papers, open books, and a half-empty teacup. A single unlit gas lamp sat on the corner of the desk, beside a collection of maps and what looked like old star charts. The air was thick with the scent of pipe tobacco, old parchment, and a faint, sweet overlay of dried lavender. "Someone has been using this room," Alex stated, her flashlight beams sweeping across the clutter. Your gaze immediately fell on the desk. Among the papers, beneath a stack of historical essays, you saw something that made your heart quicken. It was a partially unrolled scroll, its vellum aged and brittle, covered in the same distinctive, looping script as the parchment fragment you had found yesterday, and on its surface, clearly visible in your flashlight's beam, was the title, "The Celestial Atlas of Ilera." Beside it, slightly askew, lay another heavy, bound volume, its cover ornate with faded gold tooling, "The Chronicles of Etheria." They were here, The stolen manuscripts, not just here, but openly displayed, being studied. This was the forgotten study, and the thief, it seemed, was not merely a thief but a scholar. You and Alex exchanged a triumphant yet sober look. The quiet hunt was almost over, but the bigger question now was, who was using this hidden room, and why had they stolen the manuscripts only to keep them hidden here, within the very walls of Hollowmere Library? You carefully picked up the quill feather you had found yesterday, comparing its worn tip to the ink on the atlas. A perfect match. The quill feather, the parchment fragment, the mysterious key, the secret passage, all the pieces were now coalescing into a clear picture. As you stood in the hidden study, the silence of the library once again enveloped you. But this time, it felt different. It was a silence of anticipation, of an impending revelation. The rain had cleared, metaphorically speaking, but the storm within the library was about to break.
The discovery of the stolen manuscripts in the hidden study was a revelation that brought both immense satisfaction and a fresh wave of questions. You and Alex spent the better part of the morning in the concealed room, meticulously documenting the scene, careful not to disturb anything more than necessary. The undisturbed nature of the room suggested that whoever was using it had left in a hurry, or perhaps believed their sanctuary was still impenetrable. Amongst the clutter on the desk, you found several other intriguing items. There were detailed annotations in the margin of the celestial atlas, penned in the same dark ink as the fragment. These notes were highly academic, cross-referencing astronomical data with historical events, clearly the work of a dedicated scholar. A small, well-worn magnifying glass lay beside a half-finished cup of tea, still lukewarm, indicating the occupant had been there very recently. You also discovered a small leather-bound notebook. Its pages were filled with intricate sketches of ancient texts, deciphered symbols, and personal observations. On one page, a familiar crest was meticulously drawn, an open book wreathed in ivy, precisely like the one on the mysterious letter that had summoned you to Hollowmere. Beneath it, a series of complex calculations and a date that was just 2 days ago, the day the manuscripts had been reported stolen. "This is the thief's workspace," Alex whispered, turning a page in the notebook. "They weren't just taking them to keep. They were actively studying them, deciphering them. And they used this secret passage to do it," you added, examining the quill pen on the desk. Its tip was worn, just like the feather you'd found earlier, and the dried ink matched the annotations. The ink stain on Professor Alden's cuff now made perfect, chilling sense. The evidence was mounting, pointing overwhelmingly in one direction. The scholar's meticulous notes, the quill, the recent activity, the specific texts being researched, and his earlier dismissive attitude toward the strange occurrences, everything coalesced around one person. You carefully collected all the relevant pieces of evidence: the annotated notebook, a small vial of ink from the desk, and even the teacup, its rim bearing the faint imprint of lips. You knew the thief would eventually return to their hidden sanctuary. You just needed to be ready. Exiting the secret study, you relocked the hidden panel from the inside of the passage, ensuring that it appeared undisturbed from the gallery wall. The sense of quiet certainty began to settle within you. The mystery, you realized, was not so much about who took the books, but why, and how to approach the delicate confrontation. This wasn't a case of a hardened criminal, but a scholar driven by a powerful, perhaps obsessive, intellectual hunger. You and Alex decided to return to the main reading room, pretending your search was ongoing, allowing the thief to believe they were still safe. As you re-entered the grand hall, Mr. Whitaker was dusting a high shelf, while Clara was quietly arranging fresh flowers in a vase near the fireplace.
Professor Alden was back at his table, once again poring over a large tome, his spectacles glinting in the pale light. You walked towards Professor Alden, your steps measured and calm. Alex positioned themselves slightly behind him near the main door, ensuring no hasty exit was possible. Professor Alden, you began, your voice gentle, yet firm. We've made some progress in our investigation. He looked up, a slight frown on his face. Oh, anything substantial, I hope? This whole affair is rather disruptive to my work. His tone was still dismissive, but you detected a flicker of something in his eyes, a guardedness, a subtle tightening around his mouth. You placed the notebook, still sealed in an evidence bag, gently on the table in front of him. We believe we've found the missing manuscripts, Professor. His eyes widened, darting from your face to the notebook. His hand, which had been resting on his open book, subtly tensed. Indeed, where were they found? I trust they are unharmed. He tried to maintain his composure, but his voice was now laced with a tremor he couldn't quite mask. They were found in the old Ravenscroft study, Professor, you stated, your gaze unwavering. A room that isn't quite as unused as the library's records suggest. And this notebook was on the desk, alongside the Celestial Atlas and the Chronicles of Etheria. Professor Alden stared at the notebook, then slowly lifted his gaze to yours. The casual academic facade crumbled, replaced by a mixture of shock, defiance, and a profound, almost childlike sense of being caught. His face, usually so composed, paled visibly. The study is connected by a secret passage, isn't it? Alex added, stepping forward slightly. And that passage opens from the gallery, behind a panel with a carving of a raven. Mr. Whitaker, who had stopped dusting, and Clara, who had frozen with a half-arranged bouquet in her hands, now watched the scene unfold with wide, bewildered eyes. Clara's initial fear now seemed replaced by a quiet vindication. Professor Alden pushed back his chair, the scraping sound loud in the hushed room. He stood, clutching the edge of the table, his knuckles white. His carefully constructed world of scholarly pretense was collapsing around him. You found the passage, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I can explain. He looked around the room, as if searching for an escape, his eyes lingering for a moment on the unsuspecting Mr. Whitaker and Clara, then returning to you and Alex, who stood calmly awaiting his confession. We believe you can, Professor, but perhaps it would be best if we discussed this in a more private setting. The hidden study, perhaps? You gestured towards the main door, your stance suggesting there was no other option. Professor Alden swallowed hard, his shoulders slumping. The game was up. The carefully woven web of secrecy had been unraveled. He looked utterly defeated, not like a criminal, but a scholar whose intellectual passion had led him down a forbidden path. Very well, he conceded, his voice heavy with resignation. Let us go to the study. I suppose I owe you an explanation. He cast a fleeting, almost apologetic glance at Mr. Whitaker and Clara, who were still processing the sudden shift in atmosphere. As Professor Alden led the way towards the secret passage, his stride now slow and heavy, a sense of quiet triumph filled you. The mystery of Hollowmere Library was about to be fully unveiled. The rain had truly cleared, and with it, the pervasive fog of suspicion that had hung over the grand old building.
The hidden study, with its clutter of academic pursuit and its damning evidence, became the quiet stage for the confrontation. Professor Alden, looking utterly deflated, sat heavily in the chair behind the desk, surrounded by his research and the very manuscripts he had stolen. You and Alex stood opposite him, allowing the silence to stretch, giving him space to gather his thoughts, or perhaps to feel the full weight of his actions. I suppose there's little point in denying it, Professor Alden began, his voice surprisingly calm now, albeit tinged with deep regret. He gestured to the open books. They are here, as you discovered, and yes, I am the one who moved them. He pushed his spectacles up his nose, his eyes, usually so sharp, now looking tired. It began innocently enough. My research on medieval calligraphy led me to the Celestial Atlas and the Chronicles of Atheria. They are unparalleled, but obtaining consistent access to the restricted section was difficult. Mr. Whitaker is meticulous, and Lady Ravenscraft's insistence on procedure was stifling. He paused, sighing deeply. I had read Lord Ravenscraft's private journals during my previous visits here, years ago. He often alluded to secret passages, to a scholar's sanctuary he had created for his most private studies. I pieced together the clues, the specific phrasing he used, the architectural anomalies. It took me years, but I eventually found the hidden keyhole, the one you discovered in the raven carving. So you knew about the secret passage all along, Alex interjected, their voice calm but firm. Yes, Professor Alden admitted. I unlocked the passage a few weeks ago, purely out of academic curiosity at first. And then I discovered this study. It was exactly as Lord Ravenscroft described, a perfect private haven for research. He gestured around the room. Untouched, preserved, with its own gas lamp and all the comforts a scholar could desire. And the manuscripts? You prompted gently. Why move them from the restricted section? He looked down at his hands, twisting them together. My access to the restricted section was granted only a few hours a day under Mr. Whitaker's supervision. It wasn't enough. These texts, they hold secrets, connections to other historical records, astronomical events, philosophical treatises. I needed continuous, uninterrupted access. I needed to live with them, to immerse myself in their world. So you used the key from the passage to enter the restricted section. You opened the glass panels, took the manuscripts, brought them here, and then re-locked the panels and the main door of the restricted section, using your own version of the key? He shook his head slightly. Not entirely. The key from the passage opened the outer door of the restricted section. It was a master key, designed generations ago for all primary access points for the library's more significant rooms. Lord Ravenscraft had simply removed it from general use. The individual glass panels, however, are unique. He pointed to a small, intricate set of tools on the desk. I've spent years studying antique locks. It was a challenge I couldn't resist. I picked each lock, removed the texts, and then carefully relocked them. You relocked them to make it appear as a clean theft, to create a mystery. To buy myself time, Professor Alden corrected, his voice tinged with a desperate defensiveness. I never intended to keep them permanently, only to study them, to complete my comparative analysis, to make discoveries that would benefit all academia. I was going to return them once my work was done. I swear it. You believed him. His passion for the texts was palpable, his remorse genuine, but his methods were deeply flawed and ethically bankrupt. And the parchment fragment in the restricted section, you asked? A genuine accident, he confessed, wincing. My hands were trembling with excitement when I was carrying the atlas up here. A small piece must have flaked off and fallen. And the noises last night, Alex pressed? The dragging sound, the whispers behind the panel? A faint, almost embarrassed smile touched his lips. That was me. I heard you approaching the panel, knew you were onto the secret. I was moving a heavy old chest in the study, hoping the sound would deter you, or at least confuse you as to the source. The whispers were simply me, talking to myself, reading notes out loud. I slipped back down the passage once I heard you talk on the panel. The red herrings turned out to be partly old house sounds and partly his own desperate attempts to mislead you. The moving light in the woods was likely the groundskeeper, unaware of the drama unfolding within the old walls. Professor Alden, you said, your voice softening, we understand your passion for these texts, but what you did was still a theft. It caused alarm, suspicion, and distress. He nodded, his gaze distant. I know, and I am truly sorry for that. My academic zeal blinded me to the consequences. I simply couldn't wait. The discoveries I was making were profound. I felt a historical imperative. You looked at Alex, then back at the professor. The mystery was solved, not with the flourish of sirens and arrests, but with a quiet, regretful confession. This was the cozy, bedtime story resolution you had aimed for. We will have to inform Lady Ravenscroft and Mr. Whittaker, of course, and the manuscripts will need to be formally returned. What happens next will be up to them and perhaps the university. Professor Alden merely nodded, accepting his fate. I understand. I am prepared to face the consequences. Perhaps one day my discoveries will still be made public, and the library will forgive my trespass. As you prepared to leave the hidden study, the gentle light of the late morning sun finally broke through the heavy curtains, illuminating the room. Dust motes still danced in the air, but the oppressive gloom had lifted, replaced by a sense of calm. The scent of old paper and history still lingered, but now it felt less like a shroud of secrets and more like the comforting presence of knowledge. You looked at the Celestial Atlas and the Chronicles of Atheria, carefully laid open on the desk. They were magnificent, their beauty and historical significance undeniable. Professor Alden's passion, though misguided in its execution, was understandable. We should inform the others, Alex suggested softly, and you agreed. You relocked the secret passage, the click of the mechanism, a final, definitive sound. As you emerged back into the main gallery, the library no longer felt eerie. The shadows still stretched long, but they now seemed less menacing, more like comforting companions. The rain had truly cleared, both outside and within the old walls of Hollowmere. The library, for now, was safe again.
The revelation in the main reading room was met with a mixture of shock, dismay, and, in Clara's case, a quiet nod of recognition. Mr. Whittaker was aghast, his face paling as Professor Alden, now entirely composed in his defeat, quietly explained his actions. Lady Ravenscroft, summoned from her wing, listened with a tightening of her lips, her initial anger slowly softening into a weary disappointment. Professor Alden, she stated, her voice cool but not without a trace of sadness, I am profoundly disappointed. To think a scholar of your standing would resort to such subterfuge. My husband entrusted this library's legacy to our care. Professor Alden bowed his head. My apologies, Lady Ravenscroft. My passion, I'm afraid, overrode my judgment. Clara, the quiet maid, finally spoke, her voice still soft but clear. I suspected something, Professor. Your lamp in the study was often lit late at night, and I heard the creaking of the passage door sometimes. She looked down, as if apologetic for her silence, but her quiet observation had been another thread in the tapestry of the truth. Mr. Whittaker, after his initial shock, rallied, his sense of duty returning. The manuscripts, they are unharmed, you say? Perfectly so, you assured him. They have been carefully preserved, albeit in an unauthorized location. Professor Alden has taken meticulous care of them. The process of formally returning the manuscripts was handled with dignity and discretion. You and Alex supervised their transfer back to the restricted section, ensuring they were secured behind their glass panels once more. The mysterious key was placed into Lady Ravenscroft's safekeeping, with the understanding that the secret passage, now revealed, would be sealed more permanently, or at least monitored with greater vigilance. Professor Alden, accepting his academic disgrace with a quiet fortitude, packed his bags. His research, the very work that had driven his illicit actions, would be reviewed, and his standing within the academic community would undoubtedly be tarnished. Yet there was a quiet dignity in his acceptance, a sense that he now understood the profound ethical line he had crossed. He left Hollowmere Library without fanfare, a scholar unmoored from his intellectual sanctuary. As for you and Alex, the investigation was complete. The final evening at Hollowmere was spent in the main reading room, the fire casting a gentle glow, the rain having truly departed, leaving behind a profound stillness. Lady Ravenscroft, though still saddened by the events, expressed her sincere gratitude. "You have handled this with remarkable discretion and skill," she told you, offering a rare, genuine smile. "Lord Ravenscroft would have approved. You have not just solved a mystery, but you have restored the quiet honor of Hollowmere." Mr. Whittaker, visibly more relaxed now that the truth was out and the treasures returned, poured you and Alex each a cup of warm, spiced cider. Even Clara offered a small, shy smile as she quietly tidied the room, a sense of peace having returned to her demeanor. The grand library, once a place of unsettling shadows and whispered secrets, now felt truly cozy. The scent of old paper and polished wood was comforting, the flickering gas lamps familiar. The portraits on the walls no longer seemed to judge, but to watch over the renewed tranquility of their beloved home. As the evening deepened and the last embers of the fire glowed softly in the hearth, a deep sense of contentment settled over you. Another mystery solved, another world restored to balance. The thrill of the chase, the unraveling of clues, had given way to the gentle satisfaction of a job well done. You watched the last of the light fade outside the tall windows, the world turning to a soft, enveloping darkness. The library was quiet once more, its thousands of stories sleeping soundly on their shelves. You felt a peaceful drowsiness creep over you, a calm, restful fade-out after the adventures of the day. Hollowmere Library, with its grand architecture and its quiet secrets, had finally settled into a peaceful slumber, waiting for the next whisper of a tale.